Now, it's that time of the day where we're about to get ourselves some homeschooling, because it's just after the news at 12:30. The Perrier Awards, of course, coming up in a little while as well. But let's talk now to Lee Chambers, environmental psychologist, wellbeing consultant, because we're going to talk about the colour wheel and the best colours that you should surround yourself with if you happen to be working from home. Very good afternoon to you, Lee.
Yeah, pleasure to be with you today, Mike.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, you know, you're probably going to think I'm a bit argumentative now, because I'm looking at the colour wheel, which is this thing here, which is fantastic to look at. It's a lovely sort of design, even in and of itself. You say, or it is said, that one of the top colours to use is white, and I'm wondering why white isn't on the colour wheel.
Well, ultimately, it's because when you mix those colours, it's where you actually mix them, and white is actually a tone. So we actually use white to change those colours.
Right. So
And
white.
black.
So because I was wondering if it's something to do with the rainbow, because you know how when you refract the light and you get all those 7 colours of the rainbow, which are very similar to the colours on the wheel, whether if you were sort of able to refract it backwards, it would turn white.
Well, yeah, I mean that's a very interesting point actually. And obviously, from a psychological perspective, we tend to very much look at the colours themselves and how people interact with them when they're in those environments.
Yes, and you're looking at the kind of the blending of the colours maybe, and the idea of having colours around you, I suppose, which might change your mood, right?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of obviously scenarios and design is based around how can we utilize colors to change people's behaviors, to change how they think, they feel, and their emotions.
Right. I mean, interesting that you say that, because I'm sitting in a studio here, which is largely kind of dark in the sense that it's, there's bits of black, there's bits of grey. It's quite a dark environment. I don't know if there's a reason for that, you know, for audio purposes or for video purposes, but why does white come out as the best colour in general for sort of people's offices?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at my office there, it's majority white.
Right.
I mean, it's that kind of bright and clear color. But what we've actually found is if your office is completely white without accents of color, can actually be a little bit depressing.
Mm.
Yeah, it is clean. Yeah, it is concise. And yeah, you know, white paint is unanimously available across the world. But quite often it's actually utilizing other colors to kind of almost stimulate us into different psychological states while we're working. We can become more productive.
But I guess you can, having got a sort of base white, you can put different things on it. I mean, like you've got some writing behind you, you've got some little flashes of colour. I presume you could probably hang paintings. You know, you could do things to disturb the white, I suppose.
Yeah, and ultimately the ability to kind of build colour on top of white. I mean, white is a great base colour to then add accents of different colour, usually something that's a bit bolder that can promote different elements. But you can also, like you say, use landscapes, use murals.
Yeah.
Tend to do a lot of work around using plants to kind of get that natural biophilic effect in people's offices.
I mean, people say if you are working from home, you should always try and find a specific kind of designated space that you work from, rather than just kind of, you know, getting out of bed and sitting next to the bed or sitting at the dining table or something like that. It's better if you can have a designated space, right?
Yeah, definitely, because if you can psychologically detach from that domestic environment, which, to be honest, you spend a lot of your time living, sleeping, and relaxing in, if you can partition a particular space, then psychologically it does kind of put you in work when you're in that place. But obviously, we don't all have that luxury, given the fact that most domestic homes are not designed for us to work from.
No, quite. And I mean, one of the sort of the top 3 choices after white, you've got beige and then grey, but then yellow I was quite interested in as number 4, because that's quite a bright colour to have as a painting, as a painted colour on a wall. Because I sort of judge, like, for example, maybe restaurants by what colour they're painted, and I'm not a big fan of like a very loud sort of colour in a restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, when my job court did this survey, it was interesting because a lot of my work surrounds bringing more blue and more green into workplaces. Those natural colours that tend to actually, you know, do implement productivity, elements of creativity, but actually keep people a little bit less stimulated in work environments. But yellows tended to be used for innovation, for engineering campuses. It's really a colour that quite a lot of creative places use.
Yeah.
And it does increase that memory retention. It's actually a great colour for learning, but also it really increases eye fatigue, probably the quickest colour to do so.
Yeah.
don't want to be in a yellow environment for 8 hours a day.
No, I mean, I'm thinking yellow. I've been in places that've got orange walls, which I'm not very keen on. But if it's more pastel colours, is that because obviously the colour wheel suggests that you can mix those colours, and you said about white, you would put white maybe with a strong yellow to make it kind of more pale.
Yeah, so if you add white as a tint to yellow, you can bring it down so it stimulates you a lot less and actually is a lot less straining on your eyes. You imagine that the beauty is obviously to say one colour, but there's so many ways to darken or lighten that particular colour that you can actually find a real good balance that works for you.
Right. And I'm looking at this colour wheel again, and it says the first sort of real circular colour diagram was designed actually by Sir Isaac Newton in 1666. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, and I mean, again, when it's kind of looking and understanding how light works and obviously the colours that we see and the kind of practical combination, it's really a bit of a mix of art and science at the same time.
Right.
It's really interesting to think that from an origins perspective, we've been looking at this for, hundreds of years, but only from a psychological perspective, it's still relatively new.
Right. And so, I mean, what about pink? That comes in around about 9th, I think, on the list of popular colours. I mean, I suppose certain workspaces would benefit from pink, but it's still very much associated with sort of, I suppose, softer businesses, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously really popular in the beauty industry and hairdressing, and it does kind of give that element of, pampering type feel. What's interesting is I previously worked in football clubs, and a football club that I won't mention had their away dressing room painted in pink.
And how did that work out?
Well, they got relegated, so I don't think it worked that well, to be honest.
Maybe they should have their own dressing room pink. It might have given them some kind of a different stimulant or something like that.
Who knows?
Yeah. No, it's funny, isn't it? Because colours do mean so much, particularly when you talk about football and sport. I mean, colours mean so much to people, fans in particular. Yeah. You've seen, I'm sure, all of those stories. Remember that terrible grey Manchester United strip that everybody hated and nobody wanted them to wear, and you couldn't see the players, and they started playing worse.
Yep, it's amazing. I mean, Southampton had them that day, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. It's absolutely. I can feel your pain. But it's interesting. So, are you finding that more and more businesses now are kind of looking at their surroundings and trying to, if they are decorating their office, they're not just doing it because it looks a bit dirty and it needs a bit of a freshening up. They're actually thinking about it.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously with everything that's happening at the minute, there's a lot of looking around how we environmentally make our office health and safety compliant in these current conditions. And obviously there's lockdowns here and lockdowns there. I'm getting a lot about how people can set up the working from home spaces to be more productive. Also looking at the future of offices, obviously density will be different. And just looking really at the kind of how can we create backdrops that help people to become more productive in work.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Well, listen, Lee, thanks very much indeed. Lee Chambers, environmental psychologist, wellbeing consultant. If you've never thought about it, maybe you should think about it. Think about changing the colour of where you're working from home, maybe, or even your office where other people are working, because it could have an effect on their productivity.